Welcome to Waiting on the Trade, a comics book club for people who can't keep up with monthly comics. I'm Matt Ledger.
I'm Patrick Fitzgerald Fleck.
Hi, I'm Kathryn Prince.
This month, we're talking about Volume 6 of Saga, the soon-to-resume sci-fi hit from writer Brian K. Vaughan, artist Fiona Staples, and letterer Fonografiks. Now, in case you need a refresher, Saga Volume 6 features one of the series' signature time jumps and sees little Hazel starting kindergarten inside a Landfallian detention center. Alana and Marco have a plan to break their daughter out, but it requires the help of an old frenemy. And that's actually only a bit of what happens in this volume, but before we get too deep into things, I wanted to welcome Kat back to the podcast. Welcome back, Kat.
Hello.
We just had an excellent dinner of sushi, which Kat prepared, and wine, which I bought. And now we're ready to do some podcasting. Pat, I'm sorry you weren't invited.
I was going to say, I'm waiting on the sushi and wine. I'm sure it's on transit somewhere.
I can Grubhub some sushi to you if you want.
That's okay.
You guys are being too modern. Talk about fax machines or something I can relate to.
Facts. That's what does it for you?
Well, actually, I think we're here to talk about Volume 6 of Saga. So.
Hey.
Relate to that. Good seg.
So, Pat was actually the one who wanted to talk about Saga this go-around, which we'll get to that in a second. But Kat, you were allowed to choose the volume. Why, after pouring through all 9 of the currently released volumes of Saga, did you decide to go with Volume 6?
All right, well, I will say it's an interesting way to choose it, by the way, where one person chooses the title and another person chooses the volume. It's kind of cool. And I'd be interested to hear if Pat would have chosen the same one. But I would say I did not pour through them. I glanced briefly through all of them and then chose 2, 3, and 6 as my potentials. And then I went with 6 because I decided that I liked that one the best. Yeah. Part of it's petrichor. I like petrichor.
So it's the new characters?
Well, some of these are just like super mega bummer downers, and I get
Yes.
that we live in the era where like no one is safe and your favorite character could die at any moment, This one, that doesn't really happen, and I just kind of like the whole prison stuff. It's kind of fun. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, this one doesn't leave you feeling like, oh man, at the end, and some of them do.
Yeah, this one's mostly an upper, and also because it's got the time jump in it, it's got like a lot of interesting new things that kind of come not out of nowhere, but like kind of jump out at you because they're very different from the volume before.
It's got the babysitter. It's got Goose and that walrus thing he hangs out with, Brendo. Yeah.
I guess it would be pronounced Goose, wouldn't it? I always say Gus.
Yeah, it's got that umlaut.
Which one would you have picked, Pat?
Probably one of the first ones, if not the first one. I don't remember which one goes where. But I think I would pick one of the earlier ones, probably for the reason that you wouldn't have, because I like how real and dark this story gets at times. And I can see why you liked this one in particular, because it doesn't go there, and it is, on the whole, a more wholesome issue. But I think because of that, it feels more like it's treading water to me. It seems like it's slowing down, at least.
I was actually going to say, like, for maximum SEO/relevance, we probably should have picked
You're
Volume 9.
You're going to have to go ahead and define what that means real quick.
Oh, search engine optimization, Cat. That doesn't actually matter. But, like, for part of the reason that I thought it was a good time for us to finally get around to Saga, because the three of us have talked about, like, hey, one of the times it's the three of us, we're going to do Saga, right? Is because the monthly issues are, after, like, a 2 to 3 year hiatus, finally going to resume the month this goes up, basically. The month after this goes up. They start at the beginning of January, or the beginning of 2022. So Saga will begin again, and it hasn't been going for 2 to 3 years, and that's a very long time. And so this is a good podcast for people to potentially like catch up and think about what was going on in the story. And if we were really doing it right, we would have done Volume 9, which was the last volume before it went to hiatus. But who cares? We're waiting on the trade. We do what we want. So we did volume 6.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember what's happening in volume 9. So
I mean, if you want to not get dark, we don't want to do volume 9. So that makes sense that we didn't do volume 9.
Volume 6 is nice because it's not really spoilers. If you're following it, you know what happened in it. Whereas Volume 9, maybe you forgot about some of that stuff since you probably haven't reread it as many times.
Yes, which I guess if you're a new Saga person, which I don't know how you'd be listening to this discussion of Volume 6 if you're a new Saga person. Spoilers. They're going to happen.
Spoilers.
And probably spoilers for stuff that happens after Volume 6, though we'll try our best not to.
Yeah, that was my problem, is that this one was reminding me about where it was going. It's like, oh no.
See, and I don't think in 6 it has quite, like, gotten off the rails in the way that sort of had made me a little bit more down on Saga than I'd been when it started. Like, I started rereading the earlier volumes yesterday. I was like, oh, these are really good. And I was like, I wonder if by volume 7 I'll, like, still feel like it's really good, or if I'll have those same feelings I had as it was coming out, where I was like, this is kind of getting, like, it's losing the plot.
Sure.
All have some cultural critique in them, though. Like Abortion Planet in number 7, sure. But in this one, like, the two, like, gay fish dudes live in, like, a...
Well, sure, and the
what they
trans
call
character
it.
you talked about too, right?
Well, yeah, but more specifically, they're like, oh, yeah, our planets are so behind the times. And that's kind of just talking about, like, I mean, it's a little on the nose, those parts of America that are so behind the times, etc.
That was a potential question I had, is what do you feel about in such an advanced society that there is a culture that is so homophobic still? It felt anachronistic to me. Like, you have all
Not
these
really,
strange
I mean-
species and stuff, but there would still be...
Have you seen that they're, like, their break room with the coffee machine? Like, they're basically at the same level we are.
Sure, but that's why I felt it would be anachronistic. I mean, you got space flight and everything else. I don't know.
We have
hit me
space
weird.
flight, Pat.
Yeah, the
Do we?
billionaires fly their own dick-shaped rockets into space now.
Yeah, William Shatner went to space the other week, Pat. So, I mean, basically the same level.
Did he stay up there?
I hope no, I
He
don't
stayed
think
up for a few
so.
minutes.
Oh, that's a shame. Next time. But yeah, we're talking about feelings and stuff. So, Matt, why don't you go ahead and ask us
Talk about your
question.
feelings?
Yeah.
Oh.
Sure. My question I felt was a good question to ask. A, because I think it's been a long time since any of us kind of picked this up. And B, because, again, Saga's returning next month as of the time this comes out. So a lot of people are going to have feelings about jumping back into the story. So how did you guys feel returning to these characters in this story after some time away? I think I haven't read any of Saga since Volume 9 initially came out. And I bought it at an airport, I think pretty soon after it came out.
When did it come out? Do you remember?
Oh, Pat, asking me to have done research.
I mean, I can Google it right here too.
I'm Googling
2 to 3
it
years
right
ago.
now. September 2018 is when the last trade paperback volume of Saga came out.
September 2018. Okay.
Also, I think Volume 8 might be the Abortion Planet one, looking at the covers.
I was going to say, I wasn't sure. Yeah.
Mm.
I don't remember what happens before that, though.
Yeah, which I think says a lot about.
Is that the planet that becomes an egg that then kills a weasel family? Is that 7?
Oh god, that was so sad. I hate it when bad things happen to cute animals.
I think weasel family dies in
That
planet
varies.
being birthed in
Yeah.
7.
Which
and
again,
then-
that one's an allegory for people who put their blind faith into religion instead of using practicality.
Oh, no, I'm not arguing this is like layered in analogies, because, yeah, I think that
Yeah.
could also be a detriment to the series, that they're a little heavy-handed at times.
Yeah.
But anyways, returning to my question, you guys.
Oh, right, yeah.
How'd you feel getting back into the story after some time away?
It was a little weird for me, because I'm sure you remember when I first read, what was the first 3 volumes that you had at the apartment? I read them all in one sitting in like a 3-hour period. It was pretty quick. And I do love Brian K. Vaughan's writing, and Fiona Staples' art is fantastic. So it was really great coming back to the characters that I loved. But at the same time, this story was starting to lose me, and this particular volume has hints at where it's going that I wasn't completely enthused that it was heading that direction so soon. Like, I really enjoyed the will from the first few volumes, how like dangerous and funny he is. This is the beginning of sad fat Will, which is not fun, and I didn't like going back to him.
I mean, he does get to punch Gus.
I don't like that.
No, it's bad, right?
I didn't like anything that Will did.
You
in
like
this.
that? Are you a monster? Jeez.
No, I didn't like it either.
He literally is a baby
Manga.
seal with legs.
He went clubbing.
No, I think that makes Pat's point, if anything. Like, the Will gets his fingers chopped off and punches a little seal boy. Like, it's not the best volume for the Will.
Yeah, the Will and Lion Cat may have been my favorite characters in the first few volumes. So it is painful to see what's happening to this character, and it started last volume, but this one is really starting to show you the downfall of the Will.
Yeah, Lion Cat's not even in this one, is she?
There is a Lion Cat. It is not Lion Cat.
No, that Lion Cat is different.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's tardigrades in this, which anytime a tardigrade makes an appearance.
Weaponized. Yeah, weaponized
Yeah, they've got little
tardigrades.
horns.
I mean, it's still the fun, wacky universe that Vaughan and Staples have put together. So, I mean, it was fun coming back to that. But yeah, it's sort of a double-edged sword for me at this point. What about you guys?
Well, I guess before I let you get away from it,
Shoot.
Is this for you, like, is this still good Saga or is it bad Saga?
I mean, it's not... I wouldn't say Saga ever is bad.
Yeah, I mean, I purposely phrased it in a confrontational way, I guess.
Of course, no worries. I still think this is good. It's not as good, I feel, as the first 4 volumes. I'm afraid it's been a while since I've read those, so I think it's starting to teeter the other way for me at this point.
Right.
I said earlier that it feels like the story is starting to tread water a little bit here and slow down, and I think the way it goes afterwards, though I do sort of like the doomed planet in the next volume. I don't know. It's got its ups and downs, and I think this is maybe the start of it showing its wear. I don't know. I don't have anything bad to say about this volume, though. I think it's fine. I think it's a good volume.
All right, Kat, same question. How did you feel coming back to Saga after some time away from it?
I don't know. It didn't really feel weird to me. I think most of the books and I suppose other media that I end up, I guess exploring, I come in fits and starts every few years. So this is just sort of on a not that different from other things rhythm for me. Like I reread Jane Eyre once every like 5 or 6 years. I like that.
You are very much a person who like runs hot and cold on stuff, and when you're running hot, like you get really obsessed with things.
Flighty obsessions, yeah.
Yeah. Well, not even flighty. Like, how many seasons of Buffy the Vampire Slayer have we watched now? We're closing in on 4.
That's all it's gonna be, yeah. But that's a different story for a different podcast.
Would you say you're more likely to reread or watch something that you've enjoyed in the past rather than trying something new?
Oh yeah, like if it's a question between watch an episode of The Office or try a new TV show, I'm just gonna watch an episode of The Office.
Sure.
Yep.
Do you feel like, Kat, having read Volume 6 for the podcast, you'll circle back and start reading the other volumes again?
I mean, to put something like this together, even without taking breaks in between, like I feel like this is one of the few things where you actually do get to have gaps in between a chapter of a story, which I guess with with TV and even movies, really you don't really get that as much anymore. So I kind of like it, and every time something new's coming out, generally, yeah, I'll go back and at least reread a couple before, or if it's been a long time like this one, I'll probably reread them all just to be up on what's going on. What was your question?
It was close. It was close to that. I was wondering if, like, having read Volume 6 recently, you'll go back and read the others, or if you'll still wait at this point until there's a new volume.
I read the entirety of 2 and 3. I feel like I've read 1 enough times that I don't need to. Yeah, I'll probably read everything after 6 at least, when the next one comes out. Because otherwise it's just like, what's going on? There's so much going on in the story that if you don't do that, if it's been more than a couple months, you're going to be confused.
Sure.
I actually thought the same thing about Volume 1 because I have started rereading all of them because I was like, oh, I should reread all of them so I remember what was happening before Volume 6, and I got most of the way through Volume 3 before we started recording. And I thought when I read Volume 1, I'd feel the same way of like, oh, I've read this 5 times, I don't need to read this. But I definitely forgot about stuff in a way that I didn't expect to have done. Like
There's
I
a lot of
forgot.
little details and stuff in those first issues.
Yeah, and there's stuff that is still in play even in this volume where like when Hazel's shown that picture book by her teacher, that's the picture book that Oswald Heist was reading to her in volume 3, which I just got to today. So that's why she cries when she's shown the picture book.
I knew it was important. It's like, okay, I sort of remember this book, but not really.
Yeah, and
I wish that was a real picture book, by the way. That thing is so creepy and weird.
It is.
Mm.
It's like, hey, you're supposed to hold hands when crossing the street, but then you die because there's a monster in a well. But yeah, so I guess it's one of those series, kind of like when we talked about Atomic Robo, where I talked about the fact that as it went on, the volumes felt kind of weird and disconnected, and that one also kind of felt like it was losing the plot to me. But when I reread them all in succession, that felt much tighter. So I wonder if Saga will end up being the same way, like if volume 7 and 8 won't feel as weirdly wandersome. But I also would not be surprised if that's not true because I remember having pretty strong feelings about those volumes kind of going off on weird directions.
This is the first, well, I should say, this is the longest Vaughan series that I've read. I haven't read as much as I'd like of Why the Last Man, but I've heard that series as well has a lull in the middle of where the middle volumes slow down a little bit. Does that ring true to you?
Oh, that was on that recent, like, hey, you should ban these books things that Texas person put out.
Why the
Which
Last
I'm
Man?
taking as my new, as my new reading.
Your new to read list.
Mm-hmm.
Strange choice.
I would assume Saga would be on there too if they know about it.
It's not a TV show yet, so.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of hastily put together with keywords, so there's a good chance Saga's not on it. But
yeah.
Fun fact.
Yeah, so I feel like any long-running stories is going to have its ups and downs, but hopefully with the hiatus that they've taken, that they've got a fresh new look and are ready for a new tight story that they're not going to like do any crazy shit with, but probably will. Who knows?
At the same time, I'm pretty sure they've been pretty consistent about saying the story's half finished at this point. So
yeah, so 18 books, 20 books. Okay, cool. Buckle up, I guess.
Yeah, but to answer my own question, like I read volume 6 and like actually felt very strongly about wanting to go back and read the previous volumes, like not just for research and catching up and remembering things, but because I really enjoyed spending time with the characters again. And I was like, oh, okay, I should read all of this again because it's been years since I read it. So I was actually quite enthused to get back into it, which I wasn't sure if I would be one way or the other, but turns out Saga's still good.
Still very good.
And I think there is a reward for going back to reread it all in one chunk, even I'm sure when I read volume 6 the first time I didn't go back and reread everything first, so I might not have caught all the details of the children's book or the translator rings or all that stuff. So
but yeah, Matt, you were saying that you liked the coming back to these characters. I feel like that sort of goes into my question, because I certainly felt like the interactions between these characters in this volume specifically was a whole lot of wholesome like affection and love seemed to be like the motivators for almost all the groups, if not all of them, in this story.
well, maybe the will, kind of the will, love and vengeance.
No, I would say the will is motivated by love, not to do good things, but yeah. So my question is, what was your favorite, maybe not favorite, but I'll say favorite depiction of affection / love in this volume? Matt, you said the will was your favorite?
No, he's not. I can tell you what my real favorite is.
All right, please do.
It is. I'm trying to scroll to the exact page here so I don't
I mean,
mess
turn
anything up.
to the right page.
Oh, yes. No, I'm on digital.
Digital.
I am on digital. We own this comic in print form, but we do not own 2 copies of it in print form, so you know. My favorite moment of affection is the moment on, oh gosh, now I'm blanking on the name of the planet where the writer lives, and I should know because I was reading one set there earlier today.
I don't even think that is that planet, but
It isn't
yeah.
that planet? Oh, I don't know what planet that is then. It's the planet where Prince Robot 4 is hiding out with his son and Goose.
Goose.
Um, and it's the moment when the Will leaves and Upshur and Doff, basically Upshur's like really uptight about, hey, we're gonna be stranded on this planet if he leaves. Nobody knows where we are. There's like nothing out here. We're stuck. And Doff is like, what does any of that matter? We're alive.
We're alive.
Yeah, like that, I don't know. Like, not to get too real, but it had a tough year this year. Like, Kat and I have had a tough year this year. And, like, sometimes I especially get too wrapped up in shit that just doesn't matter at all
Sure.
in the long run. So, like, it's one of those moments that kind of reaffirms for me that just, like, as long as you have the people you care about and you're still alive, like, you're doing all right. And also to bring it around to also mention you in this, Pat, like even just like getting to be able to go down and do game nights with you and Mike and Ryan and Simon, like is a thing that I wasn't able to do really at all or regularly like 2 years ago. And like we've been able to do those a couple times this year and we'll get to keep doing them next year. So like things can be shitty, but as long as like there's people you love and you get to spend time with them, like doing all right. So
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my incredibly sappy moment.
I Upshur and Doff are strange characters for me. I want to like them, but at the same time they always come across as self-serving.
Yeah,
Certainly Upshur,
they're
right?
journalists.
Yeah.
There's a really weird balance as a person who has been a journalist of like trying to tell the story without just like not even making it about you, but like without sort of like bringing people's lives into it in a way that maybe they shouldn't be or wouldn't be if like you weren't doing your job. So
I mean,
yeah,
it's interesting. It'd be one way if Upshur wanted to like inspire people by the story of Marco and oh my god, what's her name?
Alana.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Jeez.
no
Like
worries.
if you wanted to inspire the galaxy and like do an anti-war piece, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like he wants to get into the like the what do you call it? The sideshow-esque relationship of a horny, what do they call them? Moonies and I don't know.
Wings, right?
Wings? I don't know.
Yeah, I
I
think
gotta
I don't
reread
know.
these. I gotta reread the earlier ones.
Didn't
But
get
these
that
two
impression
people,
at all, actually. I think they know that this is not just, I mean, it's a nice story because it does have those elements that, you know, some silly celebrity magazine might have too about blah 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 relationships, but I think they know, you know, the implications of this story and how big it is, and that's part of why they're pursuing it so ruthlessly.
sure. I guess I could say they always come off as more jaded. At least Upshur does. Dolph
I'm
seems
gonna
to be a
say I
little
think they're a little different in their approach actually, where Upshure's definitely doing it for sensationalist
notoriety.
reasons,
Yeah,
and Doff is doing it more because he just like thinks it's a story that's worth telling and like getting to the truth of.
humanitarian. Yeah,
Like I don't
yeah,
even know if he thinks it's gonna solve anything, but he just thinks like, hey, this is a really interesting thing that has happened, and like people should know about it. Whereas Upshure's like, this is a really interesting thing that has happened. People will want to know about it, and they will remember my name when I report it.
yeah, yeah. What about you, Kat? Do you have a wholesome moment that stuck out for you?
Well, I guess I like Goose.
Goose is great.
Um, yeah, he's just like, you know, this cute little furball, but then he also has a personality and is a real dude.
Very
So I guess
loyal.
any scene where Goose is like, "No, don't do that," and people are like, "Ha ha ha," and then he cuts their fingers off is pretty
And
cool.
then
For
he
me.
fucking takes a warhammer, cuts the Will's fingers off.
Is that a moment of affection?
I think so.
I don't know. I guess I was also kind of thinking about it too, and some of the voiceover that. Oh my God, who's narrating this? What's the girl's
Hazel,
name?
guys, come on, names.
Jesus. It's been a while. Anyway, some of the voiceover, like especially for the prison stuff that Hazel does, like at the end where she's like, "Yeah, these people all lost people and they never wallowed and they just kind of got on with it and dwelt on other stuff." Yeah, that's really relatable, I guess, to me. So at first I was like, "Yeah, Goose," because anything with Goose is really cute and fun, even though he's kind of like a little fireball. But yeah, that resonates with me too. Her descriptions at the beginning and the end of just these prison ladies doing the best they can.
Yeah, what was, or God, I did it again.
You call me Cat? No, it's
No.
not my name. No, I mean, there are a lot. And I really felt for the teacher, the fact that she was so willing to go so far and risk her life and her family's safety to help this little girl was very moving.
Yeah, should we talk about whether it's realistic that everyone that learns Hazel's secret in this volume is just like willing to keep it a secret?
Well, she's a little 5-year-old kid who's pretty charming.
I
Like,
was gonna say
yeah, it makes sense to me.
she's pretty charismatic.
True, but at the same
Who
time,
else
like
learns it? It's the teacher person and
Petrichor
Petrichor.
Capricornian.
and the lady from the circuit shows or whatever who like went to prison with them in the first place.
Oh,
Like I
I
feel
should
like
learned that
The
in the last
rhino lady?
one.
yeah, I feel like any of
She's
them
not a
could have.
rhino. Is she
She's
a
not.
rhino? She's got
No,
orange hair.
she's a normal person, I'm sorry. She's a
Yeah,
person.
she's a
I
person.
mean, rhino people are normal too in their own
I
world,
misspoke. I'm
I
sorry,
guess.
Kat. I'm sorry.
All people are people, including yellow insect people that are teachers.
Praying mantis kindergartner teacher, yeah.
But I don't know, it's just like it kind of felt like I get that Hazel's charming and the book is about how Hazel's great, kind of a little bit at least, but like it felt kind of weird to me that
I mean,
neither.
it's part of like they're in this prison and it isn't a bunch of dudes, it's just women, and they don't have anything to gain really by
Don't they have anything to
exposing her
gain?
secret.
I mean, not at this point. They've been together for a while. Like, there's a time jump of at least I
Few
don't know how
years, yeah.
long.
Yeah, this is true.
And I think part of my question was like this not, volume specifically seems to be a lot about found family and like the people that you are close to are the people that you would consider family, not just by blood but by shared experience. And yeah, I think it's within the realm of believability that this little girl could garner affection to the level that they'd be willing to risk their lives to protect her. Because she is special, but she's also really special because she's one of a kind, right?
True. Yeah, and I mean like she is a good little kid also.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have an understanding of the implications of what her existence could be, and maybe some of them, whether or not they realize it, maybe want to move society that way.
All right, guys,
Sure.
I'll buy it. I've
For
been
sure.
sold.
Well, good. You leave Hazel alone.
Can I tell you, my runner-up moment of affection is the bit where Alana asks Marco to jump at her as a moving rocket ship is coming towards them so they can catch it to escape a planet, because that's pretty damn good.
And that, yeah, the close up on her face. It's like, yeah, you're gonna do it, aren't you?
Yeah, and
That's
he's
good.
like, of course I'm gonna do it.
Damn it. Yeah, there's like lots of little moments, and yeah, the way that Prince Robot, or I should say Sir Robot, in this one, his like blatant disrespect towards Alana and Marco seems like, at least I sort of interpret it as his affection towards them. Like that's how he shows he cares, is by slinging insults at these two.
I
did
really
like that.
love how he just like initially has no time for it at all.
Like, get back in that tree and get out of here. I love that they ignore him completely. She runs over to Frendo. It's just pointing a bow and arrow at them, and they're just like, oh, okay, whatever.
Yeah, I like that part.
But at the same time, like when shit goes down and Marco like jumps to the prison, like Robot drops the facade of being bitchy for a second and says, I know how you feel. And I hope this goes well. It's like, aw, You do
You can
have
hope that
feelings.
it goes well and not want to die in the process, right? Like,
I mean,
I
they're sort
don't
of
know.
blackmailing him to do it. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah. Yeah, found family. You know, the kind of family that you blackmail into helping you.
He would just do it. They wouldn't have to. It's his own fault. But no, I think the moment that really hit me the hardest was Marco bringing the doll out for Hazel, and she like breaks into tears and is like, "Oh, my eyes are getting watery. What's going on?"
Oh yeah, that would have been the logical answer to this. Shoot.
I think
Well, like
all
I
our
said,
answers.
there are a lot of moments in this that are about love, and even the Will doing the awful things that he does, he's doing it out of love. Get your act together, Will. For fuck's sake.
Maybe he will. He's gonna go ask the one chick who calls him on his bullshit.
Oh boy, something to look forward to.
So, Kat, I think that brings us around to your question, which is.
Oh yeah. At first I was reading through this and I was like, I don't really have a question. I just want to talk about etymology, which is different than entomology, by the way, Pat. Um,
I know that.
so the question I had is one that I kind of sort of stole from Brian K. Vaughan, where in an interview he's like, I like to use language in the way that I do because it separates and unites us in different ways, which I'm paraphrasing horribly. So my question is, what are your thoughts on the use of language in this and how it separates and unites the characters? Um, but really, I just kind of wanted to talk about language in general and how it's kind of interesting in this. So, um, and I think when we talked about barrier, I had a similar thing, but I'm just kind of I guess, a linguist at heart, um, albeit not a, you know, one who knows what they're doing. But Petrichor happens to be one of my favorite characters, and this is where she makes her debut in this volume. But did you know that Petrichor is a real English word?
I did not.
Didn't either.
So the next time you go outside after it rains, petrichor is the word that describes the smell of the earth after a rain.
Nice.
Yeah, I guess I Googled the word too and did a bit of research. So it's a Greek word. So coming from rock, which is Petra, and then ichor is ethereal fluid, which is what the Greek gods have instead of blood. And I never thought about god blood before, but that's pretty cool. So I like the fact that, using or tweaking obscure existing words like this and putting them in has this it's this interesting balance of it's exotic enough to intrigue you, but it also keeps things similar enough that you understand instead of just coming at it full stop from a completely made up language, it's close enough that you can still kind of relate to it. So that's one example.
Yeah, there's actually an entire scene in volume 2, which I just reread, where it's Marco and his father, who, spoilers, dies in that volume. And the entire scene is written in the quote unquote Mooney language, which is, okay, Kat, this is where you can slap me through the internet if I'm wrong. Like, it's similar to Spanish. It feels
It
similar to
feels,
Spanish to me.
yeah.
Oh, you guys, it's a real language. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, I
See,
remember
slap me
looking
through
at
the
this too because I was
internet.
like, oh yeah, he's yelling salty, and that sounds a little bit like, the Spanish word for jump. And so it very clearly had some Latin roots. I did some digging for today's podcast, and it turns out it is a real language. It's Esperanto. So you can actually translate it. Like just go on Google Translate for Esperanto and put this stuff in, and it'll spit it out. And actually doing a bit of digging, this amateur translator software is actually probably what generated because apparently some of it is actually grammatically not quite correct.
Yeah, that
Nice.
happens in comic books
But if you don't
sometimes.
know, so it's interesting also like knowing that now, like that Brian K. Vaughan chose to use an existing language. And part of that is because it's probably easier to use an existing language than to make one.
Yeah.
But Esperanto is something called a conlang, an intentionally constructed language that this one in particular was created in the 19th century as, with the hope that it would become a universal second language to everyone. So they took all these Latin-based Romance languages and threw some other elements in there and tried to simplify them as much as they could. Well, actually, just one guy created it. So I guess it's kind of like the basketball of languages. but it's real, and some people actually are native speakers of Esperanto.
Can you be a native speaker of it if it's not a language that people use, if that makes sense?
That's the interesting thing about it. I didn't go too deep into the history of Esperanto, but it's been around for, I guess, at least, 150 years, probably at this point, 150 years. So, if people were just going really hard at it and teaching it in some places, and people grew up speaking it as one of their primary languages all through school, it becomes a language that people actually speak. And then once that happens, it takes on a will of its own and changes and evolves alongside society. But I thought it was interesting because it's this whole other thing. Like, it's not specially made for this, but I mean, there are people whose jobs it is to make conlangs for things, whether they're doing it, as hired on to the creative talent, or they actually are the creative motor behind something. Like J.R.R. Tolkien is probably the most famous conlang maker because he just sat down, and he was a linguist too, and he was like, I'm going to make some languages, and then I'm going to make some people that speak the languages, and that's how we got Lord of the Rings. But increasingly, Hollywood movies and television series are using these too.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the entirety of Klingon also for those of
I
us
knew
who
you were
are
going to say that.
Star Trek fans. I mean, I had to get there before Pat did, right?
Race to
Oh,
bring up
Jerry.
Klingons first. I was thinking Dothraki, but yes.
Oh, I mean, Dothraki's so new. The hipsters are all into Klingon cat. The hipsters are actually into Tolkien languages, like you said, probably. That's really interesting, actually, though. Now I kind of want to go back and translate that scene
Yeah,
between Marco and his father.
there's software online to like learn Esperanto too if you ever want to speak fluent Mooney and do some spells, I guess.
Oh, you
But
know me, cat languages, and I.
yeah, that's one of the interesting things, like, I think about languages that interests me so much is just the way that you think is shaped by the language that you know. So people who only know one language, like their whole entire world is shaped by the system of language that they use. And like as you start to dabble it into more languages, you start learning more weird things. Like, so, I mean, for example, like English doesn't have grammatical genders, whereas the Romance languages do. So, like every single noun, not just people, but objects have genders, and that's just one way that like it shapes kind of the way you think about the world. Like, oh yeah, the moon is one gender, and the sun is a different gender, and the day is a derivation of the sun, and that's the same gender. But
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah, and this morning you were doing some research into like various versions of the word you in other languages, right?
oh yeah, sometimes like I listen to YouTube, it's like weird mixes of songs at work while I'm writing, and that was one of the like I get TED Ed recommended videos sometimes, and that one was talking about the hardest word to translate is the word you because it's so different in every different language. But and I am that's part of why conquering nations come in, and like one of the first things they do is prohibit the people from speaking their own language because they want to shape the way that future generations think, and the best way to do that is to use the language that their value system comes from. So all this rabbit
Actually,
hole is to say, like, there's reasons to use all this language in here without translating it, and it's really interesting. And even going beyond that, just like the speech bubbles are all different too, so you can visualize their accents.
yeah,
Um,
that like is why knowing we were gonna have this discussion, I wanted to make sure I credited Fonografiks as the letterer here because there is a lot going on in the various speech bubbles, the various fonts. Like the robot font is very square, right? And like Upshur and Doffs is in those like very bubbly bubbles that kind of even seem like they're like thought bubbles if that, but they're not because I think they're just because that's how they speak because they're from an aquatic planet, um or at least they have gills. So there is a lot going on with just the way the speech is laid out on the page regardless of it even being a different language, which is cool because again that's you were asking what separates and what unites. The same language is being used most of the time, but it's even then you can hear it differently when different characters speak because it looks different on the page, which I think is definitely a Brian K. Vaughan thing. We got those speech bubbles that were just colors and barrier, which were pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, this novel also has an interesting take, the fact that the teacher is going out of her way to use. What is the name of the moon? Moony is not a good word to use because even in the book this
It's landfall and wreath, right? So the moon would be
Wreath.
wreath.
Yeah. The wreath language she uses in class to connect the kids. But then when Petrichor hears Hazel using landfall, or I don't even know if it's landfall, just like a common tongue as opposed to wreath, she's upset. She seems like she's losing her culture. There's two takes on it. Like there's a bridging of the cultures, or is it a landfall, like whitewashing the wreath culture?
Which, I was gonna say when Kat,
Totally is.
when Kat mentioned the like cultures wiping out other cultures' languages, I was like, oh, that feels like a thing that should have come up in this book, given how it is. But like, I guess it did come up in this volume, right? So
Yeah.
it was there
Yeah,
all
I mean,
along.
there's a lot of things that are direct inferences to our world that are on the nose, and I actually appreciate how this one is not on the nose, but it's still happening, and you can notice it if you look.
Yeah, for sure.
So when Marco and Alana are talking, which language do you think they're each just speaking their own language, right?
They're
Oh,
speaking
they got
language.
the translators. They're speaking
Yeah,
their
like
native tongue.
Petrichor at the end mentions, like, wait a minute, I'm speaking language, which is what they mention the landfall people speak. So I'm guessing that's kind of like the standard, English or Mandarin, and then they can tell that what they say is being translated into this thing that people know, or Esperanto. Oh.
Pretty ballsy to call your language, right? As though it's the only one.
Right, yeah. So they're speaking that. But yeah, it's kind of just like this whole thing, the whole fact that the Moonies don't speak their language and don't really feel the need to learn it, and vice versa, is probably half the reason this stupid war thing is going on anyway.
Yeah, I was just thinking of the fact that there are so many cultures in this volume that do all speak the Landfallian language. Like so many disparate cultures, like throughout this entire galaxy, and the one that's the very closest doesn't, and it's interesting for sure.
Yeah, so did you guys, I don't know, but if you had any additional thoughts about it, now's a good time to share them before I mention my final thing that I thought was interesting.
No, I think I shared most of mine. Like I hadn't noticed it as much as I should have before you pointed it out, which is one of the reasons I love doing these podcasts is that people come with things that I have not considered, or at least have not considered as deeply as I should. Like I knew it was there, obviously, but it's one of those things where lettering is often described as like when it's good you don't notice it, and when it's bad it just ruins a comic for you.
True.
Like, and I think because the lettering in this comic is so good that even when it's done like so technically proficiently to make the different cultures feel different, like it's still just like I'm just reading it without kind of thinking about it. So
Yeah, this series reads real easy. Read it in one sitting, like I always do. I've always wondered the fact that Wreath, the people of Wreath, can cast magic, and we only have ever seen them use their own language to do so. I'm just wondering if you could spell cast with
in a
language.
different language.
Yeah, they haven't really fully explained how magic, like they've explained certain spells how they work, but like
Yeah, but not like as a system how it works for
I feel
sure.
like,
Alana's
I
always
mean,
cut Marco off, and he's like, "It's actually not magic. It's actually like subatomic particle." Then she gets cut off. So
but when Marco and Alana have their translator rings, when Marco does magic, it's still in Esperanto. I mean, the Mooney
it's true.
language.
Yeah,
So I think maybe, but he also like doesn't speak language. So maybe if one of them ever decided to learn it well enough, they could.
right.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if in future volumes Alana has learned Esperanto to cast spells. Like that feels like a thing that could happen. So
Well, in this volume, Marco's like, "Oh, I'm sure my mother has started teaching spell casting to Hazel," which isn't true. But I'm trying to remember. In the next 3 volumes, does Hazel do spell casting? Does she cast spells?
I don't
He learns how to
remember.
fly. I don't remember spellcasting.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember why Hazel doesn't. Got to reread, I guess.
I say
I'm guessing they're probably not allowed to cast spells in prison.
Yeah, you would think the prisoners. Yeah, they're probably monitoring that pretty closely.
Yeah, they're keeping all the subatomic particles locked.
There are like battle spells, like we see mages hacking people up with spellcraft.
Yeah, I think so.
Battle mages. Yeah, magic's cool. I just like magic systems, and I wish Vaughan would explain it. I want to know.
I think it's one of those things that's not going to be explained because then
If
there
you
would be an
explain it too
explanation
much,
of
it
it.
becomes science.
I know, but I like it.
Ew. Then you have to publish papers about it.
Ugh, gross. Kat, you said you had a final thought on the language item?
No, just a final thought. Departing
Ooh.
completely from the language item is
Perfect. That sounds like our podcast.
So the other reason I picked this volume is because I really like Prison Grandma. Petrichor's in it, and she's cool, but Prison Grandma, like, you guys probably don't get this, but every once in a while, there'll be this, like, saucy old lady in a thing, and I'll be like, yes, life goals to be that saucy old lady. Like the mom from Arrested Development, life goals. Prison Grandma, life goals.
To be fair,
So,
those are usually my favorite characters, so
I was going to say, that does sound like a thing that Pat would also enjoy.
mom and Prison Grandma.
I like those types of characters. They're the ones I gravitate towards. Laura Roslin for the win.
Yeah, Pat likes saucy
Old
old
lady.
ladies.
Hey, she's not that old. She's probably not even 50.
Laura Roslin?
You're talking about that Galactica person.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's not that old. How dare you?
I'm on your team. I'm siding with you. Don't.
You just called. Well, this is another rabbit hole, but I would not call that one. I mean, at
Kat's
this
saying
point,
you're
she
not on
probably
her
is.
team because Laura Roslin's not that old.
I'm sorry, my old ladies aren't
You're one
old
of
enough
those
for
men
you,
who's like,
Kathryn.
oh, this woman is above the age of 30.
All
Put
I'm
her in
saying
with
is I
the
appreciate
gold.
those types of characters, Kat. Good lord.
There's saucy young women and there's saucy old women. And then there's
McGonagall
saucy
is the best. Is that old enough for you? Is
Okay, yeah,
Professor McGonagall old enough?
she's pretty old in the movies. I don't know if I pictured her as being that old in the books, but I guess that's up to the individual.
Right.
Well, guys, as much as I could discuss old women with you all day.
Wait, who's your favorite saucy old woman?
Oh, who's my favorite saucy old woman? I don't know if I have one off the top of my head.
Well, you should get one. They're great.
No, I agree. Prison Grandma, best. I do like that she's the one, the aggressor in the relationship. Her husband was the more like caretaker, like he did the battle weaving and made armor, and she's the one that actually used it on the battlefield. She was the warrior. I love her. She's great, and the fact that she had all the tats and decided to stay back and help the fellow inmates instead of going with her family. That also was a touching
inmates
moment.
became her family.
Exactly. Found family.
Good thing. Good volume.
Wait a minute.
No,
Wait.
when
I thought you ended these with like, do you recommend other similar blah blah blahs? I mean, granted, this was like Cat and Pat, two of the triad choice,
we
but
certainly can do recommendations.
We
Yeah.
have, we have done recommendations. We have not done recommendations on
you've done a recommendation for all the ones I did. I have a
This is true.
recommendation.
Okay. Kat, what would you recommend to the fine people listening to this fine podcast?
I have such an interest in language and the way it's depicted. I would recommend Asterius Polyp by David
Mazzucchelli.
Mazzucchelli,
Sure, yours is
which
probably
has,
better.
I think, the finest example of using text to differentiate the way people talk that I have seen in comics.
Yeah, that book's really good. Turns out. Pat, do you have a recommendation?
I came unprepared. I'm sorry.
I did too. Oh no.
Reread Saga, which I will probably do after this. So get ready for volume 10.
Which is still going to be 6 months because there's going to be. I'm actually kind of surprised that they're coming back with single issues, though I'm also not surprised because comic shops would have rioted if they didn't. So
they just did trade instead.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, everyone's got to be reading it in trades, right? Like, who's gonna? Whatever.
The collectors need the single issues.
I'm obviously biased towards wanting it to be in trades, given the nature of this podcast, but it's still kind of odd to me that it's coming back in single issue form, and I feel like all the people who have started buying Saga during this hiatus have got to be reading it in trades, and they're going to have to wait 6 more months after it comes back in single issues, but such is our plight as the trade waiters.
Yep, we will wait patiently.
If you want a story that's already complete and finished and is also like just as fun as Saga, like it's got a lot of oddball moments in the same sort of way, you could read Chew. Chew is good.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's my recommendation. I did it. Got there by looking at my bookshelf. All right, guys. I think that is going to do it for this month's discussion of Saga. As always, if you want to get in touch with Pat or myself, you can find us on Twitter as @WattPodcast. You can email us at waitingonthetrade@gmail.com, and you can find even more stuff at mattreadscomics.com. And leave us a 5-star review on your podcasting app of choice. Only 5 stars, no honest reviews.
I dare you.
Won't take them.
I double dog dare you.
Pat, do you want people to find you online? And if so, where can you be found?
So did you say Pat or Cat?
Yeah, did you say Pat or Cat?
Cat.
Okay.
I still don't know what you said. What?
Kathryn Prince.
Oh.
Do you want to be found online? And if so, where could you be found?
Oh, no.
That's what I said, yeah.
The podcast standing policy of if you want to at anyone, at me and I'll pass it along continues. You guys, thank you. This was a great discussion of a comic that we've been meaning to get around to for a while, and I am excited for it to come back.
Is that some sort of Twitter thing with the adding? Is that like a hashtag? Explain.
I can see why you like older women, Kat. I see why.
Relate to them in more than one way.
Yeah.
We have to sign off now so Kat can go get a new phone. Thanks to everyone for talking comics with us.
Thanks, guys. It was good talking.